Hi everyone, Kenna here. Let's evaluate a FedEx ground route. So I found this business on Biz by Sell, and FedEx ground routes are essentially established FedEx ground delivery operations. And usually there are multiple pickup and delivery routes that are supported by a complete operational infrastructure with FedEx. So they typically have experienced drivers and proven systems in place and are designed for hands-off ownership if you have a manager in place. So that's a good deal for investors or owner operators, or if you want to keep your 9 to 5 and own a business, then this would be a good option to consider. So I found this one on Biz by Sell, and just a general overview of the listing is it's established FedEx delivery operation based in Pennsylvania. It's been operating since 2024, so not very long as of this recording. It's only about 2 years. And it manages multiple pickup and delivery routes supported by the operational infrastructure. It has experienced drivers and systems in place. Let's look at the financial performance. We're looking at annual revenue of 925,000, an EBITDA of 235,000, which is just the earnings before interest and taxes and depreciation. And we're looking at sellers' earnings, so the sellers take home of 175,000. So it says that there's strong profit margins and there's also assets included. There's a well-maintained and modern fleet of commercial vehicles that are valued at $256,000, which is that's good. Those are assets. All vehicles transfer free and clear of liens. There's a complete operational systems and infrastructure, established contractor relationship with FedEx Ground, and an experienced driver team. So just looking at this listing, everything looks good so far. The seller is willing to provide 1 month of training and operational support to ensure a smooth transition. They're also offering seller financing for qualified buyers, which just means that they will allow you to pay a portion of the purchase price over time. And it qualifies for SBA financing. So this is good information in the listing, but I definitely need to do more analysis and evaluate the business more. So I'm going to go over to Acquire and Automate, which is the software that is exclusive to my mastermind members, and analyze this deal. So I am now in my deal analyzer, and I've already, just in the interest of time, I've already copied and pasted the information from the listing over here in the deal inputs. So the FedEx ground routes is just the business name. You could put whatever business name you want. And I've already put the annual revenue, the asking price, and the EBITDA, which is the 235. And you could put the industry too, transportation and storage. I don't have the growth rate here because that wasn't in the listing, but that's something I could get from the seller. And I can paste here the information from the listing, which, like I said, I already did this to save time. So you could just literally copy and paste the description from the listing into your notes here, which I already did. So here's the analysis that the deal analyzer gave me. It gave me a deal score of 6 out of 10, which is not bad. So it says that the deal presents a solid cash flowing business with good margins and valuable assets, but its short operational history raises concerns. So that the fact that the business has been operating for no more than 2 years, that does raise some concerns. It's not a deal breaker, but it's just something to consider if you wanted to make an offer. So as far as the valuation assessment, basically, if is this business worth the asking price? So it says that the asking price represents a multiple of 2.85 times the EBITDA of 235,000. So it says that this price appears fair and maybe even attractive if the business were more seasoned. So again, it's not a deal breaker, but you probably won't want to pay the price of 670,000 for a business that hasn't been operating for very long. So now let's look at the strengths: strong cash flow and margins, valuable assets. So it has the fleet that's valued at 256,000. That's included in the sale. So that's good. It has the established FedEx Ground relationship. So that long-term contract with FedEx Ground provides a stable and predictable revenue stream backed by a major logistics player. It has the experienced team and systems. So it's fully staffed with experienced drivers and systems in place. and it provides seller support and financing. So that means the seller will train you on how to operate the business, and it also has financing available. So some red flags are the extremely short operating history. So the fact that it's been operating for at most 2 years is concerning, but again, not a deal breaker. It's just something you want to consider if you wanted to make an offer. It also says that the reliance on a single contract. So while FedEx is a strong partner, the business is entirely dependent on its contract with FedEx. So any changes to this relationship could severely impact the business. So those are just a few of the red flags. And then it tells me the key questions that I need to ask the seller. So you definitely want to get a clear start date for the current operation because it's, again, only been operating since 2024. So definitely get more details about that and get detailed monthly financial statements. So profit and loss statements, balance sheet, etc., since the business started. Also, you want the precise nature and duration of the contract with FedEx and what are the terms for renewal or termination, because that's one of the key drivers of this business. And the most valuable part of it is that it has that established FedEx relationship. So you definitely want to understand that contract. That's something you need to ask the seller. And it says to get more evidence of the fleet. So you want maintenance records, VIN numbers, and titles to verify current ownership. And it also says to find out the average age of the driver. So what's their tenure and what's the turnover rate? Because it comes with 10 established drivers, but you want to know if these drivers have been there for a while, if they are brand new, or if most of the team is brand new. Is there a high turnover rate? Those are things you want to know. And you want to know what led to the establishment of the business. So, was there a previous owner? Did the seller start the business themselves or did they buy it from someone else? So those are just some of the questions to ask the seller. And then it tells me the recommended next steps. So definitely get detailed financials, verify the operating history, do a deep dive into that FedEx contract, and conduct vehicle due diligence and just interview the seller and understand the operating history and the reason for selling. So now I know exactly what my next steps are and how to approach the seller just based off of this analysis that I got from the deal analyzer. Now, let's talk about financing. So, usually if you're going to buy a business that has an asking price of 670,000, even if you end up negotiating that down, you still want to have some options in terms of financing. If this business does actually qualify for SBA loan, then that means it could finance up to 90% of the business and you would only need 10% down. So if you were to actually pay this 670,000, which you probably wouldn't, you probably negotiate that down a bit. But let's pretend like you were going to pay that. You would only need $67,000 to get into this deal. But let's talk about some deal structure. So I'm going to go over to the chat advisor here in the AI advisor, which is if I have any sort of sourcing, valuation, financing, due diligence question, I come over here and ask my acquisitions advisor. And it's basically like having an acquisitions advisor on your team. So I, again, already in the interest of time, I already asked how could I finance this deal with these numbers? And the 670 asking price, the 235,000 EBITDA and 925,000 revenue. And it gave me a breakdown. So it said, let's break down financing a deal with those numbers and said that it's absolutely financeable. So first it says, here are the financing strategies. So SBA loan, seller financing, your equity, traditional bank debt or mezzanine debt or private investors. So first, the SBA loan, and it tells me the borrower contribution, I'll need at least 10% of the buyer cash injection. So that would be the money that I or you would put into the deal. And you could get up to 5 million in the loan to finance this deal. For this specific deal, it said, let's assume a 15% buyer injection. So that would mean $100,500 would be the cash injection. If you wanted to put down 15% instead of 10, you would get the SBA to finance 569,500. So it breaks down like what the monthly payment would be. So there would be about $7,340, which of course the business cash flow is going to pay for this. So you would only need your 10% equity injection, and then the monthly payment for the loan, which would be about $7,340, would be covered by the business's cash flow. And so it breaks down, can the business actually afford to pay that monthly amount? And based on this analysis, it says that this makes a highly attractive candidate for an SBA loan. So that's good. And it also breaks down the seller financing and how to apply it to this specific deal. So it says that in this first scenario, let's say the seller finances a portion of the buyer's injection, which is your injection. So above we said total buyer injection, let's say it was 15%, would be 100,500. Your cash component would be 50,000, and then the seller could finance the other 50,000. So you could actually use seller financing as part of your down payment. Then the SBA loan would still be 569,000. So at in this scenario, you would only need $50,500, and you would have the seller finance the rest. So in the next scenario, scenario B, it says that the seller could finance an even larger portion, reducing the SBA amount. So let's say the SBA lender is only comfortable with 80% leverage, or you just want to lower your total debt. Let's say the SBA loan covers 536,000, which would be 80%. You put in 67,000, and then the seller finances 67,000. So again, that's just another way that you could potentially structure this deal. And it breaks down how you could inject equity, like if you use cash, or if you want to raise from friends and family or other investors, or just use rollover equity from the seller, which in some deals, the seller will retain a small equity stake, often 10 to 20%. It's less common for smaller deals, with owner operators who want to exit completely. But if the seller believes that there's significant upside under your ownership and management, then they might consider it. And that would reduce the purchase price that you need to finance today. So for this deal size, though, it says it's generally best to try to get seller financing as debt rather than equity. So you don't want them to have any ownership remaining in the business, just to keep things clean. So putting it all together, it gives me a concrete financing structure example. So asking price 670, EBITDA of 235. Let's say you got an SBA loan for 550,000, and the seller financed 70,000, and you injected 50,000, and then the total financing would cover the 670,000 price point. So those are just a few options that you or I could use to structure this deal. So it just shows that you don't need the full purchase price. If you wanted to buy a business like this, you could get into this deal for as little as $50,000. That's just a way that you could get options for financing the deal, is to use this tool and get a breakdown. And it also gives you considerations and actionable steps. So, of course, you definitely want to talk to the business broker or the seller, or the lender. And you could also start your financial due diligence, negotiate the seller financing, and et cetera. So that's just a breakdown of how you could potentially finance this deal. So you come to the deal analyzer and get an analysis of the deal and understand the red flags and the key questions to ask the seller. And then you come to the chat to find out what are the ways that you can structure this deal. So I hope this helps. As always, feel free to DM me on Instagram if you have any questions. And that is our deal of the week.